Hello and welcome to Powered by Instinct. I'm Nicole Loucks, the VP of Education and Youth Programs here at Kolbe Corp, and my MO is 5824. You all know that Kolbe is super powerful for working with businesses. You know that there is this way that you can use it to work better with teams and your productivity. But sometimes what we see is the true impact shows up in our personal life, time with our family. So today we're going to be talking to a very, very brave soul who set out on a cross-country trip with her family this summer and lived to tell the tale. So welcome to Tashyna Wingo. She's the head of operations here at Kolbe Corp. Hi, Tashyna.
Hi, Nicole.
So Tashyna, let's talk about this road trip journey because brave is an understatement. What were the basics of the trip? Where did you go? How long was it? What was going on?
Yeah, so this past June, our ultimate goal was to hit Pennsylvania for my grandmother's 90th birthday. So it's kind of a mini family reunion and a celebration for her 90th. And we decided we were going to make it the Great American Road Trip. So we drove for 17 days. We hit 16 different states, 9 national parks or historical sites, did a total of 5,800 miles from front door to front door. So it was definitely quite an adventure. We wanted to try and see as much of different parts of America as possible, and just we're all about adventure. So this was a big one.
Okay, Tashyna. So let us know, how old are your kids and what are the MOs of your family members?
Okay. So I have a 16-year-old daughter, Madeline. Her MO is 3288. Our son, Henry, is 9, and his MO is 8618. And then my husband, Tom, of almost 20 years, his MO is 3765. And then my MO, obviously, is 8543.
Okay, so you have some amazing differences in your family. So it's pretty interesting. So I'm excited to hear about how this plays out on this road trip. But sounds like so you and Henry, you guys are eats and fact finders. You guys are getting lots of information. You dig into details. You're strategic in how you approach problems. And Madeline and Tom are threes. They're going to simplify it. They cut to the bottom line. They don't need a ton of information to get started. So I'm excited to hear about that dynamic, number one. And then we have two kids who are naturally super hands-on and problem solvers who need to demonstrate, who need to feel, who need to kind of be in contact with that physical world. And then I'm really excited to hear about how Madeline's to and follow through plays out also because Tom, he has a plan and you naturally accommodate it, and Henry naturally is going to accommodate and go along with that plan and kind of move that plan and structure forward. And Madeline is going to push against it and kind of go around it and not deal with structure in exactly the same way. And then, Henry out here with a one and quick start. So has a way of dealing with risk and uncertainty that's going to stick to the status quo, that's totally going to stabilize. And then you have people on the other end, like Madeline and even Tom to some degree, who are going to kind of jump right in and try things out. So I cannot wait to hear about how this played out while you guys were in a van together for all those days. How did it start? How did you even begin planning with you said their MOs. I mean, ages alone are going to be a big factor, but how did you go about planning that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I know because we've done a few trips before, this obviously being the biggest. I work with Tom, my husband, and just kind of say, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And I've been looking up some information and kind of get a gauge from him on what he wants to do or what he doesn't want to do. And most of the time, he's just kind of along for the ride and just keeps asking how many miles. That was kind of the theme of the whole trip was how many more miles is that going to be? And then also just knowing the kids and knowing what different things. The great part is my son was in 4th grade last year, and the National Park Service has a free program to get all kids in national parks. And so he gets a badge and gets us in free to all the national parks and historical sites across the nation. And so we did this years ago with my daughter when she was in 4th grade. And so they feel special and they get to get the family in for free to a park. So it was his turn to do that. So we're really, as we were mapping out the trip, trying to figure out where we could hit. I'm someone who likes to have kind of meaning to different things. And so my goal was to hit 16 states since my daughter was 16. and to hit 9 national parks for him to earn junior ranger badges since he was 9. And so we achieved that. It was quite an undertaking, but we did achieve it.
Did you talk with everybody, like your husband and your 2 kids differently based on their MOs, like about what they needed and how to kind of get what they wanted out of the trip sort of separately, or did you kind of sit down all as a family? How did you go about doing that?
We talked about it a few times as a family, and then as I looked at different things, I would float it by Tom. Madeline, she really didn't care. She was like, "Yep, just tell me where I need to be and I'm along for the ride." And she just knows how the family adventures end up being. However, Henry, very much so, he would see me at night sitting at my desk and mapping everything and looking up different stuff. So he would sit because he loves looking at the maps. And even when we drive, he always wants to, hold the phone. He wants to look at the map, and so he would be more interested in the different places. And then over weeks, he'd be like, "Oh, are we going to be able to go to that one place?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We're really trying to figure out how it's going to work timing wise. I'm not going to be able to be there." And so I'd say probably him and I talked about it more, just us both being agents and fact finders. And then again, my husband, we would talk about it, and he's like, I'm okay with whatever you end up choosing."
And as a reminder, Henry, your son, is an 8618. And so I'm hearing lots of information. Like you said, you guys talked a lot about it in depth, in detail. Also, that one in quick start, maybe, right? Like trying to
Yep.
figure out what's going to happen and be able to expect something. So there was less uncertainty and potentially risk involved in the trip for him. That makes a lot of sense that you would have talked to him maybe the most.
Yeah, and, he definitely would keep track of where we were at, and he's like, "Okay, are we still gonna go to this place? Are we still gonna go to this place?" And I'm like, "Yep, but not for 5 more days." Like, it's still in the plan, it's still on the map, and we'll get there.
So he seems like he was really part of that planning process with you in a way,
Very, very
keeping
much
you on
so.
track and really using that 6 and follow through to help you along.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, this is a question that I think everyone wants to know because I'm an 8 and follow through, and I even sometimes don't do a really great job at this. What does packing look like for your family of 4 with all these different MOs for a long, long trip? What is that?
Yeah, and you're on a road trip, so it's hard because like, you fly somewhere and you have limited space. Now you're on a road trip, you've got a lot of space. So we were packing the minivan and figuring out, what we really needed to take, what we didn't need to take, what things needed to be accessible at different times. And so that definitely played into where we were putting stuff and snacks and what was gonna work that didn't involve, I mean, obviously, the kids are older and they're not young toddlers or young kids like you have, and so they're a little bit more self-sufficient, but make sure everyone's got power cords to, charge all their devices and comfortable, and everyone had their set spot where they were gonna be, and, I bought little special things for each one of them to kinda get at different points throughout the trip to be able to help keep them a little bit entertained.
Did everyone pack their own items and you kind of left them to it? Or I know you, so I would guess that you packed everybody's stuff.
Yeah, I did pack everything, and, they had a few things, and like I said, now that they're getting older, it's just kind of like, "What things do you guys wanna have? Are you gonna draw?" "Is my daughter gonna sit and draw? What toys or anything that my son wanted? Video games, what movies he wanted to watch?" So definitely left some of those things up to them, but as far as what clothes they were gonna wear, just knowing that what our trip entailed, that was much easier for me to choose and pack and get ready. We did realize halfway through the trip that we needed kind of an extra bag as we were shifting. Instead of carrying all of your luggage into a hotel each night, it made more sense just to have like one go bag that I would always prep the day before to take in. So I did, thank goodness for Amazon, purchase a bag at some point and get delivered so that we had that to be able to, go back and forth and not have
Mid
to,
trip you ordered?
during on the trip, ordered it, yeah.
I love that. What a great 5 and follow through. You adjusted that plan without as like, hey, this isn't working as efficiently as it could. We need to get something moving. So yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay. So now you're packed, you're in the car, you're ready to go. What are some things that you did? How did you see everybody's MOs play out while you're actually driving and making these stops? And what did you do maybe to accommodate some of those different needs?
For Madeline, so she's a 3288. She always travels a very specific way. She sleeps the whole time. And this has been her entire life. So we always laugh and say she's just transported from one location to another location. And that's cross states. Like we'll shake her awake and say, okay, we're in Missouri now. And she'll just kind of look out the window and go, okay. And then she goes back to sleep. But then whenever we're stopped and we're at our destination for the moment, now she's full of energy and she's ready to go. But all of us have been driving. We're like, okay, we need a moment. We've been driving for 8 hours and you don't realize this because you've been asleep. So she's pretty easygoing in that aspect. My son, like I said, he wanted to look at the map the entire time, which is hard when you also, me being the navigator, I need to know. And so, I'm going, no, you can't see it until I know how much further we have to go before I have to pay attention to what is happening and where we need to turn. And my husband, his whole thing was just tell me how many miles and tell me what exit. And then once we kind of had that set, I'd get to rest for a little bit. For the most part, I tried to stay awake the whole time, but he drove, I think all but maybe 400 or 500 of the miles. So he definitely was in it for the full time. And that was his main focus. And that worked well for him.
So, do you think Madeline, your daughter, sleeping is sort of like a Conable's tip or trick to like not being able to physically move around and sort of experience that through her implementer as much as she maybe would need to naturally?
Yeah, I definitely think so because she's, once she can move and she can hit the ground, then she's just off and she's off exploring. And that's been every time we've been camping. And, she's immediately off and away and doing whatever she can. But once we're in the routine of driving and sitting, I laugh and say she's just recharging her batteries. She's just shut down to low power mode, airplane mode. And she's like, nope, I don't need to do anything. I can't do anything. I'm just going to sleep.
So she's not striving anymore.
Yeah.
She's
There's nothing for her to be able to strive.
mental energy. That's so interesting because one of the questions as I was looking at the arrangement of the MOs in your family, I was like, 2 kids with 8s in implementer, initiating implementer. So you have this need to demonstrate, build, be very physical in the way you problem solve. And they're in a car for hours together with everybody. So I was like, how is that at all possible? But I mean, you partially answered that. Madeline doesn't strive. She doesn't have to use any of her ergs or mental energy to do anything during that part. What does Henry do? I mean, I guess he's looking at maps and things like that. How does he use his 8 in implementer?
So he was playing video games. There was definitely plenty of times that he was not sitting as safely in his seat that he probably should have. Feet on the ceiling and a little bit of everywhere. Definitely plenty of times that my husband was like, get your foot away from my ear because, he was just kind of stretching it and all over the place. But I did get and surprise him at one point with these like suction cup animal creature toys that he could create different things and attach them to the window as we were driving. And it was just something little and just, a few things like that I threw in since he is a bit younger and didn't, he did sleep a little bit, but just to kind of keep him, occupied. But thank goodness he's at the age where video games seem to work. So it was a lot of video games. He was fishing on his video game, but he also with his 8, he wants to tell you everything he's doing. So every time he did something, he told us that that's what he was doing in his video game and just kind of talked to the whole time. So I'm used to that and just agreeing and going, oh, wow. Oh, okay. So it was a lot of hours of that.
Peeking into his specifying fact right now.
Yep.
Absolutely. And like, I'm just going to interrupt, but quick tip for parents out there, those suction cups are gold. Like,
oh, amazing.
I take them on airplanes. I take them on road trips. I mean, we have them stuck to our like sliding door at our house. So that's a gift for anybody out there.
Definitely.
So you already mentioned this impromptu bag that you ordered from Amazon when you needed to repack or kind of like adjust your plan according to like making things easier for when you were going to hotels and everything. Did you do anything else that was just kind of detour or switch things up that maybe wasn't according to plan?
It's funny because I was discussing this with my husband last night, preparing. We realized we scheduled in time for randomness. So, we had set, which sounds funny, but I mean, we knew we wanted to give ourselves the, hey, you see this on the side of the road and There were specific times just because we were crossing such massive amounts of land that, we did have to get to point A to point B by a certain time. But then we had other days where it was like, yeah, we just have to get to this place. We have nothing really scheduled for the day. And so then we ended up taking a detour and exploring a cavern in Tennessee that we had not, I hadn't looked up, didn't know anything about. We saw road signs for it and just kind of looked up to see if it was open and said, okay, let's do it. And so it was a couple-hour detour of an experience that we've done multiple times here across the state that we were like, okay, wasn't on the list. We're just going to, we're going to try and do it. So tried to have a few moments of that scattered in.
That's awesome. Did anyone's MO or individual strengths in any way come into play? And were they ever really handy on the trip? Like you leaned on those or that person more than not?
I would say probably Tom. He is someone who, and I don't experience this in my own personal and the way I do things, he times himself. And so he knows that so a project should take him 45 minutes. And so he'll be subconsciously timing himself to make sure that he is meeting that time or that he is getting something done earlier than what he anticipated. And so that's how he ends up using his follow through to schedule his day and schedule his tasks and has those plans ready. And so for him, it was knowing however many miles we needed to go. And he then had what his plan was and then, knew, okay, we got to go a little faster or we can take it a little slower and take a detour and get ice cream in this small little town, and those types of scheduling.
That's awesome. So now what everybody really wants to know is like the dirt. What did not go well? If anything, what did not go well? What kind of disagreements were there? Maybe cognitively based or perhaps just personality or other things or age, maybe? Well, what was not the best?
I mean, there were definite moments, like siblings in the back seat saying, "This one keeps making a sound over and over again. Please stop." But, thankfully, headphones and earbuds work well for that. I'd say probably the only disagreements that Tom and I had, and it took me a little too long to get with the program, but he'd ask me how, like, going from location to location, what are we looking at? And so I would say it's 2.5 hours. And he's like, I don't care about the hours. I want to know how many miles because the hours were subjective to what the speed was and if we were going to encounter an accident or the weather. And so he's like, how many miles? And so unfortunately, it took me about halfway through the trip where I finally was going, oh, okay, yeah, it's X amount of miles as opposed to the time. So it wasn't even that it was a disagreement, but it was something that took me a little too long to pick up on that was actually how he needed the information.
That's such a great point. He needed it bottom lined in his own way. You were bottom lining in a way that you thought was going to maybe be best for him or work for him, but the combination of his, I would imagine his MO, his all four strengths really needed like bottom line, but to give him freedom enough to plan out what it was. So that's super interesting. Any other exciting things happen on the trip that you want to share?
Well, we are huge national park geeks, so it was great to be able to see the Great Smoky Mountains. And while we were there, in all of my planning, did not anticipate that there actually would be other people there. And so definitely the places and the schedule that I thought we could do ended up not happening in the same order just because we had to pivot to go, okay, no, there's too many people in this area, and something that we thought was going to take 45 minutes ended up taking 3 hours because of the amount of other people that were there. But we got to see a old Baptist church and we got to see 5 black bears while we were out and just exploring. And so it was great to be able to have those experiences, and definitely very different than Arizona. But to be able to see the green and just the lushness of everything just was what we were looking for. And just to see all the different states and kind of cross different states off of our list of where we were able to go.
Amazing. So you obviously used your Colby very well. You've worked here for well over 20 years and this is like part of your life certainly. Outside of the trip, how does this play out for you day to day? Like with knowing the MOs and just knowing the whole person for each of your family?
I'd say, in my marriage with Tom, we've been able to realize that I realized that he has a plan. So his 7 and follow through, he always has a plan or a schedule in his brain of some sort. But with his 3 and fact finder, he's not necessarily ever given me what that plan is. So I've had to learn that there are times that I mess that plan up, but I didn't even know there was even a plan to begin with in the first place. And so knowing our MOs has definitely allowed us to experience different trials like that and just different things in our life and not take it personally and just know that, okay, this is who we are. I did ask for permission to give this example, but my husband will tease me that I am puppy dogging him. And so we'll both get home from work and I want to explain and tell him, all the conversations that I've had. And he obviously knows this because, we've been together for so long. And so he knows what to expect. But he already has a plan in his head if he's wanting to mow the lawn or work on a car or do something else, and he's trying to get along with that schedule, and then I find myself following him around the yard and following him around the house, talking to him, and then he finally will look at me and go, "You're puppy dogging me." And then that's kind of my sweet indication to go, "Okay, we can talk later. We don't need to talk now." He's allowed, I'm going to say he's allowed me, but he's been gracious enough to let me get some of my stories and conversation out. And then I go, "Okay, yeah, we can talk later about this. You only have so much daylight that you can get, work on the lawn or go do the project that you're doing with." And so I think some of those things that if you don't know that about your spouse or a family member, that you can take offense to that and think like, well, they don't care about me, they don't love me in that moment. And it's like, no, they're trying to strive and accomplish what they need to do. And it's choosing the time for that. With my kids, it definitely has been helpful to know that for them, like it's school. So my daughter, so Madeline, who's a 3288, I never thought in a million years that online school would work for her. But we started doing online school a few years ago and she thrived. So once the pandemic hit and she had to go home for school and do online, suddenly she went from not caring about school and, not being as engaged to becoming the student of the month, which I never thought in a million years would be the situation. But she really thrived. And so in talking with her, because obviously, we talk our cognitive strengths and our MOs quite frequently at the house, she realized she could manage her distractions. And so that really was kind of eye-opening. And it was like, yeah, she could get up and take care of a couple classes and then she could go feed the birds and, run around with the dog and take the dog for a walk. And then she could fix breakfast and then go back and do a couple assignments. And so we found that allowing her just to naturally schedule herself throughout the day has worked tremendously. And then she's able to work ahead and she's actually finished most of her semesters several weeks ahead and given herself extra breaks and allowed for days that she doesn't feel well or days that, she doesn't want to have to do schoolwork because we're going to go on vacation and she doesn't have to stress about it.
I was gonna say, I really love that Madeline with her you like hit the nail on the head. I hear this all the time that they don't necessarily have the follow through, right? And so people are meaning really a 7 through 10 and follow through a natural need to structure in a sequential way, right? But Madeline has this really great strength to vary the approach and keep things more random in how she sort of attacks certain problems, which is awesome. And so having this self-paced online environment really allowed her to thrive using that strength and didn't put her into like a really stepwise sequential sort of plan that didn't work for her and opened up that door for her to say, "Hey, I need this and then I can attack this and do this," and in a really awesome way. So I'm I love that and it's really exciting to hear that that has worked so well for her.
Yeah, and to be able to find just different tips. She has dyslexia, and so to realize the different things, and she can have the lesson read to her, and to not have that pressure, and she can take her time to be able to accomplish what she needs to for the lesson. Has really changed how she retains things so much more when I don't think she's retaining it, and then she's like, "Oh yeah," and can answer it back to me. It makes a lot of sense. That I'm like, "Okay, no, you're whatever. Okay, just keep going. Let me know if you have any questions." For Henry, he is a social butterfly, and he needs people constantly, and needs to be touching people constantly. And so he definitely is not someone who could be at home for school. And so we have him in a great charter school It's a small charter school and a small class, and he has just thrived there and he loves school, and they have a garden that he can work in. And so just being able to see the different ways that he can interact and thrive there has been great, throughout his school so far. I do have his teacher take the index every year. And actually, last year, my Strengths Week project here at Kolbe was to be able to, with you, Nicole, do a session for his whole school. So it was great to be able to share those strengths with the teachers and just help them not only realize how they all go about doing things, but also to start getting that seed planted that the students themselves do things so differently. And so what works for one student doesn't work for another, and how you can end up finding that happy medium that works for both.
And I have to say, when we went into the school and did that Strengths Week project, Henry was our helper with physical materials. He was passing things out, he was carrying things, he was doing all sorts of stuff. So, again, if given the opportunity, kids, students, they will really use their strengths for good and really utilize those in a really purposeful way. What would you tell to parents who are maybe thinking about both getting A's for themselves, but also having maybe their kids do student aptitude quiz?
I highly recommend it. And that's not obviously coming from someone who works at Colby, but it really makes a difference. And there are times where Tom will be in a conversation about maybe something we're struggling with one of the kids on, or just questioning things about their future. And he will, more often than not, he'll go to the conative, which is so great because obviously Colby's just a byproduct from, his wife working here. But it's great that we can have those conversations and really truly understand that. And he'll ask things, and is this more just one of the kids' behavior, or do you think it actually is conative? And for us to be able to have those conversations, and I try to empower the kids. You have this great strength in doing X, and this is why. Remember, you remember your result, and remember where you've seen that on my screen when we've been working on stuff, and just to help kind of always have that in the back of their mind that it is a great strength that they have. It is, Madeline being a 3288, structure and details aren't always her friend. But you know what? She's the most creative. She will jump in and do everything. There is nothing. She is fearless. And that is definitely not how her brother is. And that's not how I am. And so it is definitely something that we have worked with them on over the years to really empower them and see the strengths that they have.
That's amazing. Okay, Tashyna, is there anything else that you think our listeners should know about this trip?
I think part of the planning process, I definitely by the end of it found myself a bit in the weeds, fact finder, and a bit follow through wise as well. So we were in the process of moving here at Colby. So I had a lot of details that I was in charge of here, but then also trying to figure out all the details for our actual trip. And after spending countless hours and nights of scouring different websites, and I started following on Facebook and Instagram. I was following all the national parks we were visiting so that I could be up to date on any changes or special programs and stuff that was happening. By the end of the planning process, before the trip even happened, I almost sometimes felt like had actually been on the trip. And so I can say was a bit of a struggle sometimes because I was like, oh yeah, I already know all of this information, and let's just I was already like, what's the next aspect of the trip that we needed to be on, instead of finding myself always engaged in that actual moment. And so as I think as an initiating fact finder, that's definitely something that I struggled with. And I found Tom afterwards, we've even laughed, months afterwards, and he'll ask a question and he'll go, did we go to that state? And I'm like, were you on the same trip the rest of us were on? Because I'm like, yeah, we were in Missouri, we were in Indiana, and he was like, oh, okay. I was like, I don't remember. You just told me however many miles to drive, and that's what we drove. And so obviously he remembered key points of it, but there are certain details that he didn't, remember in all of that. And so we kind of laughed looking back at that with the visiting the national parks and the different historical sites. Tom and Madeline, their threes in Fact Finder, definitely were not interested in looking at all of the statues and reading all of the records everywhere and going through all of the museums. But that was definitely something that Henry and I are very intrigued with. So we kind of found the happy medium of how much time we would spend at each location. And so Henry and I would focus on answering the questions in his Junior Ranger book and Madeline and Tom would kind of go off. And it was great because it was actually a bonding time for the two of them. And so I would see the two of them laughing, and I then would realize they're making jokes about different things. And that's how they kind of found the doldrums of how to get through what they were doing. They just kind of made it a fun game. And my daughter loves movies and adventure like that. So she was convinced everything that we went to had to do with the movie National Treasure. And was like, oh, there used to be a statue there. I wonder what was underneath of it. And me trying to, be appropriate and say, shh, like, stop that. There's other people around. And then, so her and Tom would kind of run off and be silly along that way while Henry and I were, engaged at the President Taft house, learning all about his life. And so it definitely was interesting because we were able to split off and enjoy that time to really feel like we were meeting our need in that aspect, but yet they weren't as bored. There were definite times that they were like, okay, we're done. We're done with this. We're done with this museum. Can we go? So it definitely was, it was interesting to see that play out, which again, I knew. And so as opposed to if you didn't know these things, you would think that they were being disrespectful or that they didn't care. But to, be able to give them the grace and give us the grace to know that's just how we naturally, that's how we naturally approach it.
Yeah, and I love I several of the things that you said, but one is just that real team approach. It's like you have different ways of approaching problems or dealing with things or different needs in general cognitively. And so figuring out how everybody can really get what they need. And I love your way of splitting apart. I mean, Kathy Colby talks about that all the time when you, even in the business environment, when you have people who are naturally have a potential for cognitive conflict. So you have differences in any one or more modes that they kind of work separately for a while and then come back together. So I mean, it's an amazing conable that you've figured out, and I'm glad that Colby has helped you in doing that. I also love that you mentioned we had a move going on at Colby and you had a huge hand in that and you had lots to do there. And one of the reasons that Colby is so amazing and it's just so important, even to get this for your family and to know the strengths of everybody involved, is you're a whole person and you're not one person with one set of cognitive strengths at work and another person with another set of cognitive strengths at home. This is who you are. And this is the amount of energy and, mental energy that you have available until you replenish as a person. And that includes both or any parts of your life, right? So if you are really busy using some of that energy at work, it doesn't leave as much for at home and vice versa. So really looking at managing that mental energy across kind of your whole life is so important and such a great point, Tashyna, because sometimes we wonder about maybe employees at work or family members, like, why are they not doing what they're doing? Well, you got to look at them as a whole person, and that makes a really big difference.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I found times where I was like, nope, I need to step away, or I, felt the need that I had to get all of this planned out, and that was just my own personal drive. And then I'd spend hours at night sitting and mapping it out. My husband definitely does not want to go down the same road twice. So then you're trying to figure out where can we constantly be moving to. And I'd look back at the next day and I'm like, okay, none of this even remotely makes sense. I only made, we only made it so far. And I'm like, okay, I need to give myself a break and figure this out and, recharge and allow myself to just go, okay, no, I'm going to try this again. It's not working. I'm just going to step away from it right now.
I mean, Kathy Colby says, one of her 5 rules, do nothing when nothing works. And that's that's what we all have to do sometimes, definitely. And for anybody listening, the student aptitude quiz is our cognitive assessment for kids. So anybody ages 10 and up, it's about a 4th grade reading level, can take the short assessment. It's very similar to the Colby A, but with language that's really accessible for kids so that they can understand their strengths too and understand how to use them in things that they care about most, like doing well in school. And it also, you can get a parent guide that accompanies the report that's really just meant for the parents so that you can help have those conversations and start empowering the kids to use their strengths in ways that work best for them as well. All right, Tashyna, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all about your amazing trip and how brave you were for going on that, and also some amazing things that you do day to day to help make sure that everybody's cognitive needs are met in your family. It's amazing. If any of you guys listening want to understand how your children naturally take action so you can help them in school or just in life in general, or on a road trip if you're so brave, head to Kolbe.com and look for the student aptitude quiz. And we have certified consultants that you can work with, and they're listed on Kolbe.com. And many of them are Kolbe certified youth specialists. So they've gone through special training to be able to utilize Kolbe with youth at a really, really high level. For adults, the best place to start is to take your Kolbe A index. And if you have a significant other, you can also have them take it, and you guys can do a takes to report. And as a bonus, there are some vacation tips and tricks in there as well for you. So see you next time on Powered by Instinct.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. This show is brought to you by Kolbe Corp, a company that helps leaders and organizations thrive using the only instinctive strengths assessment on the market. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at Kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.